So as I said in the previous video, you're only using one of these two options. You're either using FK or you're using IK. So, taking a look at what we have, looking at that IK handle control, this is set to 1, which means IK is in control. And we can move around with IK handle. If I go to my FK, that being said, the FK control is also controlling the wrist rotation. Remember how we set that up with the actual wrist. This is not correct because if I go back to my IK control and start to rotate it, it doesn't quite work out. So what we have to do is build a connection between all of this so that when I'm at 0, FK is in control, and then when I'm at 1, IK is in control. We also have to build a parent constraint controlling the rotation for the wrist here from the IK handle. Not the IK handle, but the IK wrist control. Because the IK handle does nothing with rotation. Absolutely nothing. So don't worry about that. But this IK wrist control, we do want to control the rotation of the wrist. So let's start building that up. And first and foremost, what I really want to do is go to that wrist and this parent constraint. I want to add some extra information, which is just going to help us out greatly. I'm going to rename it to FK, wrist parent constraint, because that's what's controlling its current rotation. Because the reason I want to do that is we're about to add another parent constraint to that same wrist joint with this control. So let's go ahead and do that. So with this wrist control, I'm going to shift select now the wrist and go up to my rigging toolkit, constrain, parent, option box, make sure translate's turned off. Mine is still turned off, so that's good. And add that in. So now you can see in the outliner that wrist, we obviously have the palm parent underneath it, but we also have a new parent constraint under our FK, which is the IK. So let's name that so that we know what these controls are. Cool. With both of these controls, over here on the right side of the screen, you can see that the L underscore IK wrist control W0, we have both of those. Sorry about that. I just had to have a drink and I had a eureka moment for another student who's having an issue. Anyway, so both of these parent constraints have this last LIK wrist control option, and we can turn those off or on. Currently, they're both on, which is going to cause some issues. So we need to connect them up with our hand control using those set-driven keys to turn them off or on. And since I've named them FK and IK, it's going to help us out a lot. So let's go back to our set-driven key menu. So key, set-driven key. This is on the animation shelf. I want to load both of these as the driven because that's what we're changing up. And the driver is going to be our hand control and this FK IK switch. So currently, let's see, what it is. It's set to 1, which means FK should be turned off and IK should be turned on. So let's set that key up. So the IK wrist control, let's see, select it here. There we go. If you select it over here, it'll actually select it in your outliner as well. This wrist control should be 1 because that is the IK. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and key that. And then I'm going to go down here to the FK left wrist control. And this, since our control here is set to 1, meaning IK is going to be enabled, we're going to turn off the FK. So I'm going to go over here and set this to 0 and say key. And notice now this has a dark blue line next to it, meaning, hey, I'm being driven by something else in Maya. Cool. So we need to do the inverse. So I'm going to go back to my hand control, set this to 0. I'm going to go to my wrist parent control, select that left IK wrist control. Instead of being 1, it's going to be 0, say key. And then for the LFK, select that LFK wrist control, and turn this to 1, because we want to turn our FK controls on, and set to key. Cool. So now, theoretically, we should be able to switch back and forth. So if this is FK IK, that means this parent constraint is going to be controlled by, maybe not though, by the FK control, but it is currently not. Let's see if it's controlled by the IK. Nope. Let's turn this to 1, see if it's being controlled now by the IK. Interesting. So we're going to make sure that that is turned on for the FK. Oh, actually, never mind. I'm so sorry. I know what is messed up. It's the next step. So currently, when this is set to 0, the FK is not in control because there's something extra that we have to connect up here. And that's going to be on this IK wrist handle. It's going to be this, where's it at? Where's it at? Where's it at? Oh, so sorry. It's not on the IK handle. It is on the wrist, the actual wrist joint. Let's see here. Blend parent. That's what we're looking for. So currently, since I have 2 parent constraints on this wrist joint, we now have this blend parent option. And what this is asking us is saying, hey, which of those do you want? And if we select this and kind of middle mouse click and drag in our viewport, we can adjust this from 0 to 1. If I change this back to 0 and then also change that to 0, now my FK wrist control is working. So we need to get that connected up as well to our hand control. So hand control is already loaded in the driver, so let's load that wrist in the driven, and there's our blend parent. So I'm going to select it. Look, currently our FK-IK switch is set to 0, so this blend parent also needs to be set to 0. It currently is. Fantastic. Key. Then we'll go back to our FK-IK switch, turn that to 1, select our wrist, and turn that blend parent to 1 as well, and say key. So now we should be good with the wrist. So FK-IK switch is set to 1, IK being what we're looking at when it's set to 1, so let's control that. Fantismo, FK-IK switch set to 0. Fantastic. And now the IK rotation shouldn't control anything. And inversely, when this is set to 1, the FK shouldn't control anything. Awesome. The last bit to kind of quote-unquote finish up the arm, I mean, there's still a decent amount of work left, but the last bit is, notice here, let's switch to FK mode, and I go to rotate this out. Yeah, we break our elbow and our wrist kind of moves odd. That's because none of this is parented to each other. So, you know, all of this work that we did earlier, we have one extra step. Very similar to like we did with the head. We got to parent these suckers to each other. So I'm going to start with this, the group for the wrist. It's going to be parented under the control. So the group going into the control. So select the child, which is that wrist group control, and then the parent, which is going to be that nerd circle, and hit P. And same thing here. I need the group of that elbow control, and then select the shoulder and hit the shoulder control, not the group. Hit P, and there we go. So now our wrist, our elbow, and everything is rotating properly for forward kinematics. I'm going to reset, undo all those movements. We can also go ahead and do this for our clavicle as well. Actually, let's hold off on that because we need to connect some other stuff later. We'll circle back to the clavicle when we start connecting everything together. But yeah, so, and same thing with some of this other stuff. We're going to have to group a lot of this stuff and really clean up our outliner. But that is kind of much later in this process. But just to kind of show you here, let's kind of manipulate my arm into a pose. And again, we'll do finger controls later. I'll show you a couple of ways we could do those. And then I'm going to go to that hand control. We're currently set to 0, which means we're in FK, so those FK controls are controlling the arm. But changing this to 1, now the IK is controlling it. Fantastic. Awesome. We can set that on a table. Move the elbow. Awesome. So, and you can see I'm here hitting undo to undo all of this stuff. But also what's really great is now that we have these controls, I can just zero out all the translates and rotates to get it back into position. That's our arm done, with the exception of the clavicle. We'll circle back to it, don't you worry. Unfortunately, we cannot mirror these controls over. So, round 2. Gonna do it for the left arm. Good luck.